thing. Hey, there it is.
There
So
it is.
there it is.
I'm
So,
silencing myself on like I'm in the theater because I just heard it go off right before we
oh,
started.
that's okay. Again, like candid. So it's okay to be yourself. You don't have to feel like you're having to be a certain way. This is our 18th episode of this fun little podcast, which I have so much fun
Awesome.
doing, especially when I have people on that have an appreciation for film and movies. It's even more fun for me.
Yeah.
Hopefully for them too. But
Yeah. I think
um,
it'll be fun. I love this sort of thing.
so for my followers, my guests, my whatever, this is my friend Kylie. So Kylie, I always start every episode by asking people just in general, what kind of movies do you like?
Oh boy. Well, I this isn't very popular with a lot of the people I know, but I'm not really a huge fan of comedy. Like I'm a
That's
very
okay.
serious movie person. And
No, that's
then
okay.
and I for someone who worked at a theater, I'm not really big on like the musicals that are made into films either. I'm not huge on like the live action remakes of animated films. Like I tend to, I like stuff that's not too slapsticky. I like stuff that is plausible to actually have it happen in life, which is
Okay,
funny
okay.
because most movies like
So
aren't really
movies,
like that.
I'm just thinking here for a second. So for you, movies are less an escape because I
Yeah.
mean, when they're over the top and not real, maybe that's too much,
It's a
is
little
what
bit
I'm getting.
much. Like, I mean, not a lot of times with friends, they'll suggest going to a movie like that, and I'm like, but once I go, I enjoy myself, but it's not the sort of thing I choose. Yeah.
Fair enough. Do you got any like four examples on the ones that you do like, given that that desire?
Yeah, sure. So, um, it, I haven't seen a lot of the newest movies like when they're brand new. So I think I might be a good person for your show because a lot of these trailers, I'm like, I haven't even heard anything about this movie because I'm not
That's
really paying attention.
and
I'm not as plugged in
that's
as I should be,
a
maybe.
that's
Yeah.
100% what I want.
Exactly. So like in recent years, I really like foreign films. I like the fact that we're kind of looking into, even though it's plausible, it's not something that we might see on an everyday basis here in the US. I like I like the Oscar winners on occasion,
Mm.
but not
Mhm.
usually. So like I liked Minari a couple of years ago. I like one of my favorite movies is Life is Beautiful, the
Oh,
Italian.
I
Yeah,
loved Life
great,
is Beautiful.
very nice movie. Yeah.
What's weird too is I'm really bad at this. I love watching them once they're translated, but that's one of the ones that's better in Italian than it is in English because they definitely it definitely loses something, like in the things that he's trying to convince his son of, like, oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, it's a game, yeah. But
Yeah, a lot of stuff gets lost in
mm,
translation. And so
mm,
that I think that was actually one of the things that made
mm,
me more inclined to try to learn new languages was watching foreign films for that same reason, because I
yeah,
felt like I was losing a lot of stuff. And if you watch it with someone who's a speaker of that language, they're like, well, that was a weird translation. And then you're like,
yeah,
kind of want to know what they
yeah.
actually
What was really intended? Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So
that's
those
interesting.
are great. But I did see like Black Panther a couple of years ago with like a friend, and I thought that that was really cool. I'm a costume person, so the costuming for the whole
Mm,
backstory of the costuming and how it was developed for that film was really fascinating for me. So I mean, every so often a mainstream action movie is okay with me, but it's
mhm.
because I focus on a narrow aspect, and I'm like, well, I'd really like to see this part of it, and then
Well,
yeah,
I know one of those is one of the movies that we're going to talk about today. So I'll be curious to know your opinion on that.
sure.
Um, I so the first one we started with, I think, was what was the first trailer that I sent you for today? Was that
It was the horror film.
the horror film?
Yeah,
Talk
I'm
to
trying
me.
to remember the title. Talk to me. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
So what did you think of Talk to Me? What kind of thoughts did it evoke?
Honestly, it's kind of funny because after saying what kind of movies I do like horror films, even though they're not always as plausible as you might think. A lot of them have elements of the supernatural like this. It looked intriguing. I mean, it's a lot of the kind of like monkey's paw-esque school of thought, so it was fascinating to see like this cursed object and what
Mhm.
happens. And it was kind of interesting that it was a group of relatively young people who were talking about like the social media aspect and trying to like put it out there. And so it kind of had, in that regard, it kind of gave like Ring vibes, or like where when you're watching the VHS tape, not to
Oh,
take my
yeah.
too much, but like that whole idea that it's like, oh, it's kind of a new retelling of a movie that's kind of a similar trope. And I've always kind of liked the classic horror stories, to actually read them in literature. So I thought that looked intriguing. I think I might actually try to look into it when it comes near me, if it hasn't already. Or I might look it up when it's on the streaming services.
So that one I'll interject for just a second and I'll let you know. So that one is not out yet. I did I caught an early release on that, and I believe the like for real date on that one is the 28th of July. So the really cool thing about that one is it's from relative unknowns director wise, but it's getting a lot of buzz. It's two Australian brothers that made the movie together. The cast are all relative unknowns to us. I don't know if they've got notoriety in Australia, but it was also filmed there. And one of the things that, and if you're, as a horror person, you probably notice this in movies from time to time. A lot of the best horror movies to me are the ones that kind of just leap right in. They don't give you a lot of exposition and a lot of unnecessary backstory. They just get to it. And not to give anything away, but this film does do that, and I think it was really good because of that. It does what it's trying to do. It doesn't tell you a whole lot of why, and you have to use your own brain to kind of maybe figure it out. You don't really get a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Closure.
Sure. I kind of think that that's a really great thing to do with a horror film, because
I do too.
They thrive on your uncomfortableness, your discomfort, so not knowing what's going on and not knowing where things are going to end up. The only thing I was a little concerned about is every time I see an animal in a trailer or a movie, I'm like, please don't let the dog get it,
Yep.
It's just one of my things that I'm constantly at this anxiety about the animal, so
I think I can allay those fears. As far as I remember, nothing bad happened to any animals during the movie.
Okay, good. I think there was actually a site at one point that actually listed the films where it's like, what happens? I think it's called What Happens to the Dog or something like that. I'm not sure if it's going, but I remember I used to access that a lot.
Yeah. No, I think you're safe. I think you're safe on this one.
Oh, okay, good.
One of the other things about this one that I thought was interesting too, and it kind of takes a different look at the other side, in terms of a lot of times you get movies like this where people are just being haunted. It's just very happenstance, and I'm not sure. As far as the trailer goes, did it give you any sense for what you thought the movie was about in terms of plot?
Well, there were little snippets of like alluding to like the fact that like somebody, like they talked about where they thought the hand might have come from, and they talked about and then there were some words later on that made me think that the people that were coming into these people's possession of these people were somebody that may have had either unfinished business or something else going on with them. So that was intriguing too, because like you said, sometimes it's just kind of random. It's like, oops, I'm possessed, just by this thing that's looking to find something. But I would be interested to see where that went, because it is a little bit different. It's not usually something that's tied to people. It's usually that genre. I feel like that subgenre of horror seems to often thrive on like the happenstance of getting possessed, and you're like, well, I didn't realize that would happen. I'm a perfect person otherwise. Not usually. People in horror movies are terrible across the board, but I do think that was an interesting. They alluded to it. They didn't really like come right out and like, okay, you're being haunted by your aunt who you like murdered or something. It wasn't like anything that over the top.
I think the thing that kind of may fall back a little bit to the liking movies that are a bit more grounded in this one. I mean, it's obviously, it's a horror movie. There's supernatural stuff, but it enters with the premise that spirits and things on the other side require like an invitation. They can't. The hand is almost like a conduit. It's it's asking you to invite in a connection. So that way
Yeah,
things aren't just willy-nilly floating around and they can just take
yeah,
you at will. And I thought that premise was also very interesting. It's more than just like, I got to be scared around every corner. It's
yeah,
you willingly sit down and you put yourself in this situation. So if something bad happens,
right. It's kind of like
you
you were,
know,
you knew
yeah,
something might happen. It was kind of like the Ouija board concept. It's like, okay, well, if you're gonna goof around,
very, very similar
bad
to
things
that.
might
Yeah.
happen. And I got like big Ouija board feels from this too. I'm like, okay, so they have this
Mm,
object and they're all like getting
mhm,
together to see what'll
yeah,
happen. But I mean,
mhm,
you almost want something to happen, but you know that if something does happen, it might not be good. Um,
yeah,
Most people obviously don't know they're in a horror movie. They're just, you know,
yeah.
but at the same time, it's like part of the reason that people do that is, there might be something kind of either fun or scary, or you might get like a jump scare or something psychological going on. That's why people do it. And like you said, you can't really blame anything from happening if you said, hey, I want to do this.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, I mean, I think you already sort of said it. So I don't know that I have to double check it, but you did say that this is one that seems like something you would go see.
I definitely
Yeah.
think it's funny because I don't have a lot of people in my circle that enjoy horror. So a lot of times I'll watch it alone in my own house, which isn't the greatest idea, especially if you're watching it late at night and all that. But I do like horror in the theater because it's so immersive. Like it's
Mhm.
scary enough when you're watching it on your living room TV, but when you're like surrounded by it, it's really a lot creepier. So maybe I'll even go see it myself.
Well, if you really want, I'll go with you. I
If
enjoyed it,
you'll
and
accompany me after we
I
have
would see.
lunch.
Yeah, I would see it again. Yeah,
Oh,
totally.
absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
it's I I don't want to set the bar too high because I get overexcited about some of these things. But I mean, so when I sat down and I wrote a review for it, I gave it a 5.
All right.
I think it's currently a contender for the best horror movie that I've seen this year.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think
Being
I've seen most of them. So, but
Yeah,
take
I'd
that for
love to
what
see
you
it
will.
again. I'm glad to know you like horror because like I said, most people in my life are like everything but a horror movie. I'll go see.
No, no, no. So as a child, my mom had the option to, she had two different movies in front of her. I don't know what the context was, but she was either going to show me Hook for my first movie or Night
Mhm.
of the Living Dead. And needless to say, for
Both
about
good
the
choices.
first 12 years of my life, I was afraid of zombies. So,
Oh, well, there you
yeah.
go. And Night of the
Hmm.
Living Dead is so cynical. Like the way it ends and everything, you're just like, geez.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of my faves. So
I could take a whole episode and just talk about the social commentary and effects of
so
Night of the Living
much,
Dead.
so
But yeah,
much. And for a low budget flick, I mean, did you know
mhm.
it's not under copyright anymore? It's in the public domain.
There was an animated version that came out about a year or two ago once that happened, and I felt really bad because it was not good.
That's a
Um, yeah, I was kind of just like, can you go away? You're ruining my good movie.
Honestly, it may be controversial, but I'm not a big remakes fan unless something was super lousy to begin with. And I feel like Night of the Living Dead was just perfection.
Yeah,
Like, don't touch it.
they did a remake for it in the '90s, and I think Tony
Or wasn't it
Todd.
called? They didn't call it Night of the Living Dead though. They called it something else, right? Or did they?
No, no, no. The one in the '90s, it was like a shot for shot in color remake.
Oh, I
Um,
don't think I did see that
Tony,
one.
Tony Todd was the protagonist, as the black hero, and I have a soft spot for him, so I like it. I still don't
Yeah,
put it above the original, but it's good.
sure. It's still worth seeing. It's not like a complete dud.
Yeah,
And,
I mean,
and
they add a little bit of stuff, but it all stays mostly the same. Farmhouse, secluded, brother, sister, all
yeah,
that stuff. So,
hey,
yeah. So
that's
that's
debatable.
really. I also don't think I knew that you liked horror too. So I'm really.
I
I
do.
was kind of worried that this was going to be the one that I wouldn't be able to push you towards. So I'm glad. I'm happy. I'm
All
happily
right.
surprised.
And
Yeah.
supernatural, I mean, it's something so outside of my sphere because I'm not really a superstitious person that
Right.
much. So
Well, and,
I don't know what it is about horror. It just grabs me. No
well,
put no
yeah,
like
and right after your intro of I like these grounded things. Oh, by the way.
I know, right?
Yep.
It's like, well, it's funny because usually the Venn diagram of what me and my friends like, my friends and I like, is like I'm over here with what I like and everybody else is over here. And so a lot of times I'm like, I won't even mention that because it's not something that most of the people I know like. So now you know.
That's fair. So number two on our list, I believe, falls under the category that you previously mentioned of mainstream action film. What
Very.
what one was that?
Mission Impossible. I I just know it as Mission Impossible. I'm so bad with titles, Navio.
So it's
I know it's Mission
so
Impossible.
the on paper title for this one was Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One.
Part
Because we
one.
have
I
to.
did notice the part one,
Yeah.
which I
The
think was
unofficial title would be Mission Impossible 7.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I knew it was somewhere along in the in the series. Yeah. So
So
yeah.
what did that one look like it was about?
Well, it's a little tricky. Like I feel kind of about Mission Impossible like I feel about the James Bond series.
Mhm.
I don't mind spy movies in general. Um, I don't like big like explosion movies so much, like car chases, like things that are totally implausible. And Mission Impossible has always had an air of implausibility with a
I
lot of
mean,
the things that go
its
on.
title is literally this is the thing that isn't supposed to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So like all this stuff happens. And I had as far as seeing where it was going, it was kind of hard to tell
Okay.
because like to me, a lot of movies like that thrive on the idea that there's this thing that's obviously like world threatening or people usually world threatening, sometimes people threatening, usually some big thing that's going to make like the world blow up or cause World War III or something like of that ilk, And so I had it in the back of my head, it's probably going to be something big, some big issue. But what
I
the
mean,
issue is,
it's
I
so
feel
big that they couldn't contain it in one film.
right. And I feel that was the funny part about part one. I'm like, oh, this is only going to be like the first part.
Mhm.
But it seems like the problem is never the main thing with those movies. It's just kind
Mhm.
of like, here's how we try to solve the problem. The problem's kind of immaterial because you're going to be more entertained by all the stuff that happens with us trying to keep this from happening. So yeah, I mean, I didn't really know where it was going, but I had an idea that I knew what the lead up would look like, kind of. I mean, there's probably
No,
going to be some new things they try to throw in there that haven't been done before, but
sure.
yeah.
Now, have you seen any of the other Mission Impossible movies?
That's so funny because I was thinking when I was watching it, I think I saw the first two. So I had a
Mhm.
little bit of nostalgia, but they came out. I remember watching the first one when I was in high school, so I'm dating myself a lot. But yeah, so the first
Number
and second
one
came
is
out.
1996.
Yep. So 96, I was a sophomore in high school. And so I watched that one with my friends, and it was fun because I was going out with my friends. We were there without my parents, we were just kind of at the movies and at the mall. And so I had good feelings, good memories of that. And I remember specifically the one scene where, like, in the beginning, I think it's in the beginning of the movie where he comes down into the room and he has to not touch all the lasers. And I always thought that was kind of fun at the time. My movie taste was a lot different then, though. So,
Mhm.
so I mean, if somebody that I liked and got along with said, "Hey, let's go see a movie," and like that was one of the choices, and they really wanted to see it, I'd probably see it. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't offend me. I don't think it would be boring. It's just kind of
So,
like, eh,
it, this particular summer has been the summer of what I'm calling sequels to franchises I'd never seen, and it's not as if that I didn't know they existed. They just had eluded me for one reason or another.
sure.
And
You'd
I
never
think
seen a Mission Impossible movie?
prior to this I had not. So
Yeah.
I think maybe as a kid I saw one, but not to any level that I remembered it
Oh,
when I
sure.
rewatched it.
Didn't stick
So
with you.
right. So I binged 1 through 6 prior to 7, and they they all sort of kind of fall in line with what you said. There's almost always some sort of world-ending threat, and it's so they sort of continue to just set their own bar higher. I don't think they've quite gotten to Fast and the Furious jump the moon level because jumping the shark's just
Right.
not enough anymore.
Right. I was just thinking
Um,
about Fast and Furious. I'm like, yeah, at some
yeah.
point you do have to say this is getting a little ludicrous.
And they did definitely give me James Bond vibes, kind of like what you mentioned. The one big thing that I noticed differently about these, and I kind of respect him for it, regardless of if I like or dislike some of his stuff outside of his acting. I
Right.
respect the hell out of Tom Cruise's ability to do these stunts over and over and over as he gets older and older and older.
Right? It's kind of eerie. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
have you been replaced by like a bot or something like
I,
that?
I just kind of
wonder
keep
about
trying to
that.
remember if I've seen him in broad daylight. Like, is he a vampire? He doesn't really look like he's aged much. He's, obviously he's got Hollywood money, so that may
Yeah,
play
and
into
that
it.
helps.
But
Yeah. And
um,
Kylie is good for the blood, maybe.
and he's the
Who
only
knows?
one, because everybody else definitely has aged.
Yeah.
Um,
The thing is, like I was thinking that like he looks very similar to what I remember him looking like in the first one.
yeah,
Maybe because I
well,
was
right,
younger too.
and they were all very fresh in my mind. So as I got to it, I'm like, wow, this is like, you know, it doesn't even look like it's Ethan Hunt's older brother. It looks like
Right?
Ethan Hunt a few years has passed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Um, the movie's long, but it doesn't feel long, which is really good. It's 2.5 plus previews, but it
It's
really
not
didn't drag,
horrible.
which was cool.
Mhm.
Because when you can feel the time, it's not good.
Especially for an action movie, you're like, okay, come on now.
Yeah, no, it just it hit beat after beat. When you were mentioning how like it's not really about the thing, it's about the kind of it's kind of like the journey.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
the film definitely it makes the thing, because there's always a thing, but it makes
Yeah.
the thing this looming threat, and it's more like it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle, and you're like, I have to do this piece, this piece, this piece, and this piece to stop
Yeah.
the thing. And that's
Right.
really what the 2.5 hours is. It's like, okay, well, I have to do this first, which leads to this, which, you know what
Mhm.
I mean? And it's
Yeah, and then
it's
there's some
methodical.
conflict because like once you get to the end, you have so little time to do that final thing always.
And
It's not like they finish it 5 days in advance and they're like, well, that was easy, you
well, and
know.
they're smart too, because they played it in such a way that when the end hit, you didn't really feel like it was the end, because you knew there was a part two
Yeah,
coming. So you get to the end and you're like, oh, that's right, that they're not gonna resolve this because
right.
next year.
Yeah.
Um,
And then that's kind of funny because I think
mhm,
that it's a big chance to take with a movie like that because you're assuming that
yeah,
everyone who sees the first one isn't just
yeah,
going to get irritated by the fact that it's not
there's
resolved
a
and they're going to go
cliffhanger.
to the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That being said, I almost you almost could like watch one and then not watch any of them again, like up to seven, because they're pretty good about giving you what you need to know without really having to watch the others. But my concern is when part
Yeah.
two of this two-parter comes, you're not going to have that same luxury. You are going to absolutely have to have seen part one.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
That's a
um,
bummer. One of the
so if you
other
get a
things,
random inclination to watch part two next summer, if you haven't already watched part
right?
one, just remember you're going to have to watch part one.
That's true. It's like the prequel for sure. The
Yeah.
first part of it is a true set, a true box set.
Hmm.
One of the other things that I noticed about this one and really Mission Impossible in general is that it doesn't depend as much because I'm a big fan of the James Bond movies, even though I'm not a big action fan. And
Yeah.
I like the idea that James Bond kind of has like a team of people around him that he can
Mhm.
call on for stuff. And I feel like the Mission Impossible franchise doesn't really do that as much. It's kind of like focused. There are other people in it, but it's really kind of focused on Tom Cruise. And
Um,
I wonder if that is true in this movie, but I also wonder if like at some point he can't do it anymore, what they're gonna do with the franchise because he's been the guy for so long. I had watched the TV show when it was on,
oh
and
wow.
yeah, and I really like the TV show, but of course you get because it's a series, you get the chance to maintain the same staff and a lot of
Yeah.
cast, and a lot of them have the same like some of
Mhm.
them one episode might have like a bigger part for this person or something like that. So how'd you feel like when you watched it? How'd you feel about
So, the franchise starts out that way, but I would say when it hit its stride about the middle,
it? Mhm.
he did kind of get that crew.
Oh,
That's
okay.
again kind of makes it
That's
feel a
what I
little
get
more
for
fast
watching
and
the first two, right?
so I mean, Ving Rhames was with him kind of from the beginning. Um, so he's maintained that spot right along. About maybe the fourth movie, you get Simon Pegg,
Oh,
who
I saw Simon Pegg was in. I really
yeah,
like him.
yeah, and yeah, so he's got his little crew that he trusts.
All right.
Um, but it was earned. It was, I don't think it appeared overnight. I think they had a similar idea, and over time, you can't be rogue and run around the whole world alone forever. You got to have
Yeah,
friends. So,
exactly. So I'm
um,
glad to hear they did that, because I do think that
mhm.
uh, it provides more depth than just following one person around and watching stuff blow up.
Yeah. One of the other things which seems to happen sort of to the with this James Bond comparison, it's very the opposite. James Bond, as we all know, kind of cycles through Bond girls,
Mhm.
like movie after movie.
Yeah.
Something is
Honestly, I think the Bond girl could like go away and the movies would be more entertaining. That's kind of my opinion, but
yeah. Well, and in these Mission Impossible movies, there always seems to be the girls, but the later movies kind of stray away from the they get together thing. I mean,
sure.
there's sexual tension, but it's not. I mean, in the last couple, they were just there. They were working together, things like that. But they don't ever. It never crosses a line.
Oh, that's
So
interesting. So
yeah,
maybe
I
they're
mean,
just
like,
like, oh,
in
we need
yeah,
to put a
there's
woman
and
in here
it's
somewhere,
an
so it's
interesting
not just
dichotomy.
yeah.
Um, Given it's a very similar genre.
That's refreshing, I think. Yeah, because I always thought one of the weak parts of the Bond franchise was that there was always some girl who had to just, and some of them were just terrible. I mean,
Mhm.
like Christmas Jones comes to mind, and also like Honey O'Toole from I don't remember which one it was where she gets thrown in the swimming pool, but I'm just like, they're horrible, like no personality, just totally vapid. They're not really doing much.
I think I think the first one where they really kind of turned that on its head was oh, was it Goldfinger?
Oh
Because
yeah,
it had Pussy Galore, who
yeah,
just constantly said no to him. She was like in charge of her own like fleet of
right,
like
yeah.
women, and
They
she
strayed
she
back
definitely
and
wasn't.
forth a lot. Yeah,
Yeah, she definitely wasn't one dimensional. I'm just here to be Bond's foil.
exactly.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, and I like
Haley
the
Atwell.
women that were like villains, like
Yeah.
Grace Jones and View to a Kill, I think it was,
Mhm.
where like I mean, she could choke a guy with her like thighs, So that's pretty impressive. I go for that, that sort of like representation. But
Yeah. And so the woman that's opposite Tom in this one is Haley Atwell of Marvel fame. She's done other stuff too, obviously, but like she spent a lot of time as Agent Carter in Marvel stuff.
sure.
And this was uh this was definitely kind of different. She had to kind of play a bad guy at first, and then she gets kind of swept up into what Tom and the bad guys have going on. And I don't want to like spoil anything, but she her intentions aren't clear cut. So who knows where she's gonna land come the second one.
Yeah,
But
that's interesting.
but yeah, overall another one that I'd recommend. Weirdly too, after having watched them all, I wouldn't normally say that I liked a seventh entry into a franchise like that more than maybe say the original.
Yeah.
But I kind of like this one more than I like the original.
Oh, okay.
I because I think like the original had to do some world building, and sometimes those
Yeah,
sequels can
that
kind
is
of
true.
just go.
Yeah,
So and
that's
that
true.
yeah, and that's what it did. So
I think I'm
so
blinded by my nostalgia about it.
yeah,
That's the only
and
reason
well,
I would be like, oh, the first one, because
that
it was
there's
just
nothing
like
wrong with
that
that
time
because
in
that
my life.
that would
Yeah,
get you into the theater. So
yeah.
what was our last one for today?
The ones I was gonna
Hmm,
call it the old ladies movie. I'm so bad with titles, I
kind
swear.
of yeah.
Let's see. The Miracle
The,
Club.
the Miracle Club, yes. And so I actually meant to go see this one at your theater there at
I was
the Capitol. But I was going with somebody else, and they were sort of landlocked. They couldn't leave where they are because of like work obligations.
sure.
We ended up seeing it in Syracuse.
Oh, okay.
And
Where in Syracuse did you see it?
um there's a like an art housey theater.
Is it
The
the
heck
Manless
is it?
Art Cinema?
Yes.
Great place.
Um
And those like
yeah,
shooting, we call them shooting gallery theaters, long and skinny.
yeah, well, and
Yeah.
it's a lot like the ones at the Capitol. Um, like some of the ones that are just like they're probably like 20, 30 seats, and it's
Yeah.
like
I saw
straight down the
Inside
middle.
Llewyn Davis there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've been to a couple things there in my life.
nice.
I mean, that's the peril of working at a theater. First of all, you kind of don't see as many movies as you like, and secondly, you often aren't available to go to other theaters. But I have
This
been
is
there a few times.
this is one of the reasons why as much as I like movies, as I probably wouldn't want to work at one because I don't want
Yeah.
that desire curbed. Um, what did this trailer do for you? What did it seem like it was about?
Well, sure. So it we joke at the Capitol that this sort of meeting is, this sort of movie is gold for our audiences because we tend to, at least when we first opened, we tend to trend older, and like the
Okay.
Maggie Smith movies did super well. So the fun part for me is like it feels a lot like a particular subset of the sort of movies we show where it's like either old ladies or old men getting together and doing something that's kind of spunky, you know. And so there was a good amount of spunk in the trailer. I think that you get that a lot from Maggie Smith movies.
Yeah.
I was really excited to see Kathy Bates in there because I love her too. And Laura Linney. It was kind of like a triumvirate of like good, not that this was a chick movie, but it probably like trends more on the chick side than on the men's side. But um it was a pilgrimage movie, you know, a lot of
Yeah.
yeah, talking about like going to some place and having some sort of like experience that you need something to change in your life, so you go there and you're like, I'm expecting this big experience to happen. And they did allude in the trailer to the fact that it might not has been like, you have such high hopes for something like that, and sometimes you overlook what like the actual benefit of going to a place like that might be. And you, if you don't get the one thing that you were thinking you would get, you're like, oh well, that didn't work. But if you kind of look at it in terms of other things that you got from it, maybe you get more out of it. So I think it's kind of, that's kind of the arc it's taking, but also like the reunion aspect, and you don't quite understand the dynamic between the daughter of their friend and like what happened. They allude
Yeah.
to it, but you don't really know, which I think is on purpose to try to get you to come and watch it. But
Well, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
really good that they don't give that away in the trailer because too often these days the trailer gives so much away that when you get to the movie and you watch it, like, okay, well, you gave me all the best parts. What do I do now?
extended version of the trailer, you know.
Mhm.
And then on the flip side of that, some trailers are like so misleading that you get there and it's like a totally different movie. So
Yeah,
I feel like this one, like they didn't go
it
into,
it hit the sweet spot.
yeah, I know,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So I mean, I do, there are a lot of things I like about this sort of movie.
Mhm.
I like to see movies with older ensembles
Mhm.
because I think that in Hollywood, certainly, and I notice it happens a lot in British films and
Mhm.
foreign films, and that's part of the reason I like them so much, that they let actors grow old and they still use them a lot. Here we do that mostly with men, and
Mhm.
we'll let them grow old and still do films with them. But I really like to see these actors that I watched when they were younger keep developing in their career and seeing them in different roles and everything like that. So I really like that part.
So
Um,
this one definitely gave me vibes of like I feel like and that's what you're saying is 100% true. I think over the last couple of years somebody noticed that same thing and they started to try to start to trend to some of those
yeah,
older women that have acted all
I
their
agree.
lives. And
Yeah.
I mean like things like seeing with that 80 for Brady movie or the couple of
Oh
book club
yeah.
movies where you get these
Or
like
anything with Lily Tomlin. Lily Tomlin's kind
yeah,
of having a long moment over
yeah,
the
they
past
all are.
years. Yeah.
Diane Keaton's been in like
Yeah.
5 or 6 movies over the last year or two.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Jane
do think,
Fonda.
yeah. I think
Oh
we're getting the idea more than we used to. I think
yeah.
because the boomers are getting to be of age and they're big moviegoers. I think that
Hmm,
the generation before that, they were moviegoers, but they would stop at a certain point because they really wanted the escapism. That's my theory.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So, yeah,
I think you're right.
yeah.
Um,
So, so I like that part of it. And
mhm,
I like, I always like the kind of story arc where like you're trying to figure out, it's kind of like the man versus himself with like some external things thrown in there. So saying, okay, you know, I need to do this. And part of, they alluded to the fact that they did it because of their friend. but I think that they also, like, the little snippets they show, at least of Maggie Smith's life, are kind of like, oh, this has gotten very pedantic and like just kind of like pedestrian at the same time. So taking a break from that, seeing like I just need a change in my life, that sort of thing, and then throwing in the conflict where you thought it was just going to be like a trip where you went and honored your friend, and then seeing her daughter come, so it adds an extra element of conflict to it. I do like that kind of movie. It's kind of, I think, a lot of times quietly impactful. It doesn't necessarily tell you anything earth-shattering. Like, you kind of know that, like one thing, you can't go do one thing and change your life. It has to come from inside. So it's something we all know, obviously. But I do think that, like, watching that sort of movie and watching how people develop and how they deal with things like that, it's interesting to me. And I kind of like the quiet situational films anyway. So it might be something. I don't know if I'd go to the theater to see it, but I might certainly watch it if it came up on like Netflix or something. I feel a little bad saying that working at the theater, but it's just the reality of it. If it's on, I might watch it. Yeah.
I think the first thing that struck me about this one, we were kind of talking a minute ago about the some of the older female actresses that are kind of getting back in the limelight.
Yeah.
Is the ones that I saw in this aren't those women, but they still, had their time too, and I'm happy that they're getting to be part of this sort of like renaissance. Like you said, Kathy Bates, Laura Linney.
Right? Yeah.
God, her name's gonna escape me, but she played Professor McGonagall, in every Harry Potter.
Yeah. That's Maggie Smith. Yep.
Oh yeah, Maggie Smith. Yeah, you just said it like.
No, that's okay. Well, I watched her. I mean, I've been watching her since like the Otello days, where she was like young in her 20s. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a deep cut. But seeing them in something like this made me happy, because I'm glad that it's not just a certain few. Like maybe it's gonna expand and you'll see a lot more people that were in a lot of things that haven't been in a while, and are gonna start kind of being, I don't want to say relevant again, because it makes it sound like they weren't.
Yeah.
But at least more visible. Another cool thing about this one is, and I love that this part of the world is getting more of a light on it these days. It's like late 60s Ireland, which when I sat down to watch this, I was like, I could picture period pieces in the 60s in the US. If you asked me what 60s Ireland looked like, I got nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
yeah,
I love seeing those parts of the world, like the international stuff, like you were talking about, get a light on them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, a light that isn't like a yellow filter. I mean, not that we do that with Ireland, but like it's true. We don't. We're so in a microcosm with our media, and it's kind of funny too, because around the world, friends that I've talked to, American media is so prevalent. United States media is so prevalent in their countries that, like, they know a lot about us and our culture and what we've looked like through the years, and we don't know as much about them. So they can almost tell me what the US was like.
We're a little more self-absorbed than the rest of the world, or at least our media is.
We're definitely, I think, because we produce so much media and it's so ubiquitous around the world, it's natural for us to watch it and kind of look at our own belly buttons over and over again, so.
Well, some of the things that we find newsworthy are definitely the types of things that if you turn on the news in other parts of the world, they would just never even consider putting those things on, because they're like, what? Exactly. That's not news.
Yeah, but it's true.
It's a very uniquely American thing.
Yeah, I agree. And so I agree about the 60s Ireland. I mean, Ireland's such a beautiful and timeless place anyway, but like the socio-political stuff that was going on then, and like just the what the look was, it's not something that, it's not even a period of Irish history that a lot of people would study in school, just kind of like, oh, you learn about the family, and you learn about like the great migrant. Well, once they come to the United States, we start caring about the Irish, what brought them here, but we don't really think about Irish history.
Like the IRA and
exactly. I almost went to grad school for Irish literature, so it's particularly fascinating to me, like seeing Ireland films.
I mean, you definitely have to watch this then.
I should. You're right.
But there's sort of that and I don't want to make this sound like a bad thing, but there's sort of this like in the movie there's sort of a groupthink mentality about this place in France called Lourdes,
Mhm.
uh where the Virgin Mary, I guess, appeared in a vision to a woman there on the side of a
Very
mountain.
famous place.
And,
Yeah.
and they yep, and they carved the church and the bats and everything in that whole area. And a lot of these people who are having everyday issues, that maybe in today's society we wouldn't even consider, bringing to a church, who want these problems fixed, are all vying for spots to go to Lord's because
Yeah.
it's sort of it's sort of funny that it's really expensive to go somewhere,
Oh, yeah.
based on your religion to,
Like going to
seek a
Mecca.
cure.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah,
mini
very much.
Mecca.
Very much. And yeah, it's still depicted that way. Like the film kind of starts with a contest, like a talent contest essentially through the church where they're raffling off tickets to Lord's.
Yeah.
And it's there's also this dynamic mixed in of one of the friends, who passes away right at the start of the film, and her daughter does return. And yeah, there's this very, very uncomfortable unease. We don't know why everybody doesn't like the daughter. We don't know why she
Right.
left. And it's kind of a slow burn, and we get it bits and pieces, and it very truly kind of feels like how it would come if somebody who was banished came back into the circle. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think everybody would blurt things out all at once. It would kind of be like, oh, okay, you're still here. Well, let me bring up this
Yeah.
thing.
And
So,
I was thinking it was interesting in the trailer because all these people are so religious that they're going to like on a pilgrimage, but here's this person that they don't know why she left, but they're immediately judging her and saying we don't want her in our lives. It's
it's
not a
just
very
it's the
Christian thing. I would
yeah,
think.
it's the
Yeah.
story of like Christianity over and over. Every time somebody, should be getting forgiven and brought back into the fold, they're pushed as far away as they can.
Yeah.
It's
Uh,
sad.
yeah. Funny aside about Lords. When I went to Ireland for a Yates summer school at the end of my college days, and I went into one of the theaters and they had like a little tiny, it wasn't really a shrine, it was like above something in the theater, like this little box, and it had like a little tiny statue of the Virgin Mary, and it actually had holy water from Lourdes in it. So I think that in Ireland it's such a huge thing to be
Yeah,
protected
yeah.
by Our Lady of Lourdes.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting to see it in the trailer and think, oh, here's somebody who's
Yeah,
actually going to Lourdes. It was such a big deal.
yeah, oh yeah. And when they get there, they, I mean, I don't want to like spoil it because it is definitely like one of these movies where it's about, all every little bits of the details, but the fun little number that they threw out there. So it's 1967, and I guess the trips to Lourdes, or the church, had been established in 1842,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
late, or maybe they've been keeping track since 1842. Um, Between 1842 and 1967, 62 miracles had been recorded. So
Oh, they're writing it all down.
yeah, and so I don't know if the people before they get there know that, because it seems like when they hear that number and they like weigh that against the span of time that's occurred, there's there's a lot of revelation for a lot of characters that are like, really, that they consider it very few.
Yeah.
To other people, I'd be like, wow, that's a lot.
I know, right? And more than one miracle seems like a good number to me. But I mean,
Right.
but if you think about it in terms of saints, I mean, they have to have, I think I'm not Catholic, but I think they have to have a certain number of miracles to be considered to be saints, right? And
Yeah, it's like a punch card. Hit your 10th miracle and you're
right.
you're a saint
And
robe.
then they're like, oh, yeah, you get a free milkshake or you get to be a saint.
Cool.
Um, that
I don't
sort of
know. That
thing.
milkshake sounds pretty good.
I know, right? I was just
Mhm.
thinking because I'm on a steward's punch card right now that has one more punch before a free milkshake. So I'm
Yum.
right win. But yeah, I do. And that's another thing. Like I mean, I'm a religious person, but I'm more of a, I mean, I'm religious, but I'm also kind of a theist. So it's fascinating for me to see like how other religious cultures handle different sorts of things. Because I mean, the idea of miracles, the idea of like doing this one thing and having this being um do this thing for you because you went to see them or something like that. I mean, and not everyone needs a miracle. I mean, you think about the Bible and how Jesus was like curing people by touching them. I mean, obviously a miracle. Those people needed a miracle. But when you're going just to go, what
Yeah.
really is your expectation? You know, do you want to see a miracle? You're like, oh, I paid for my ticket, I need to see a miracle, or is it just kind of like, oh, I know
They all,
miracles happen here,
yeah. They
and
all had different
maybe to be
reasons for
miracle.
wanting to go. And I mean, I guess it all would sort of depend on our feelings on their given issues. You know, some may be mundane, some may seem like, why did you go there for that and not a doctor, maybe, you know,
Yeah,
things like that.
yeah,
And there is sort of a sense at the end that we have a greater appreciation for miracles, because
yeah,
it's sort of like if they hand them out to everybody, you know, how miraculous is the miracle? If
yeah,
anybody could just go to the corner drugstore and get a miracle, you know, it's not a
yeah,
big deal to me.
exactly.
So,
And then there's so much opportunity to be
mhm.
grateful even in the absence of miracles. And I got when they were getting on the bus, and I think it was the priest that said, you know, uh, kind of I got it as like the at least the moral of the trailer, if not the moral of the whole movie, is it's like you might sometimes not getting what you want is really what's going to help you figure something out, or like it alluded, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it's so
Mhm.
true. You know, you being attached to the outcome and then being like, oh, that didn't happen, so let's throw it out. I mean, being able to say, here's what happened as a result of this whole thing, and kind of stepping back and saying, oh, I can be grateful for that, and that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't come here, you know. So
Mhm.
I mean, it's I know we're getting like deep into the weeds of philosophy, but and it's probably a much lighter movie than that, but I think that's part of the reason that people like those kind of movies, is they're like, okay, you know, give me a reason to, even if my life isn't full of miracles, to like find some appreciation and gratitude in like the everyday stuff. So
And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that some amount of the people that go on this journey um figure that out. Because it's, you know, you gotta, or
yeah, I
else
know, right?
you're gonna wallow in the fact that you didn't get what you wanted. Or I guess
Right.
or I guess it could be, you know, a very smarmy, sappy movie where they all got what they wanted and lived happily ever after.
Oh,
But
I've
I don't
watched other movies in that like subgenre like that, and I they weren't as
know.
like satisfying. It's like, you know,
In in
I
my
felt
in my
happy ending.
older age, I find the movies that turn left when we expect them to turn right make me rate them a little higher, because I'm like, you didn't play it safe, and that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I honestly, I think I have less respect for a movie that just has a pat answer to something, and it's like, oh, the Hollywood ending, you know, the
Hmm.
typical, oh, you know, this is all going to be fine, and everybody's going to be great, and everybody's going to get everything they wanted. Well, that's not really life, you know. That's not how life works. So I guess if you like escapist movies, that's it. But I'm not really an escapist movie person, so I'm like, I want a touch of reality.
I mean, I guess of the three that we saw, this is probably the closest to reality you would get. The most grounded, the most real feeling, in terms of like the interactions and things.
Yeah,
And it was um and I don't know if this is just a Kathy Bates thing or if this is just a lot of people in other cultures, but I found it very funny as a part of their talent competition. They were singing, and Kathy Bates, they all had Irish accents because of where they were and all that. But Kathy Bates, when she sang, in a very flawless American voice, and I
really
I
hard to
found that
sing in an
hilarious.
accent unless you're like hamming it up.
Right, and I was just like, am I being led to believe that she just doesn't sound Irish when she sings, or is she just that good of a singer? I mean, like, but
Thought
um,
like when I've heard the singers from other countries,
mhm.
unless I know they're from that country, I just,
Ah,
if they're singing in English, I often just think that they're American or British. And
uh-huh,
like I've never been able to tell, like even the Beatles, I was
uh-huh.
never really able to tell, oh, they're British by listening to them. I knew they were British, but I could never really hear the difference. And like like Australian singers, I have the same thing. I have a hard time. I'm like, is that just their nuance of being a singer and that's how they sing, or is it their accent that makes them sound like that? I've always been bad at selling. I'm not saying that like Kathy Bates shouldn't have like tried to put on an accent, but I'm like, what would that even sound like? You know?
Right.
Yeah,
We'll never know. Like, unless of course
never
they've
will.
cast her in another Irish movie with singing, and she
Yeah,
tries
and if
again.
anybody could pull it off, I would think that she would be able to sing in some sort of like as
She's
an
had a
Irish.
great singing voice. I mean, I don't know if there's something that I should have seen her in before where she sang that I just don't have the point of reference for. But
Oh,
she sounded, excuse me, she
I know
sounded
she
great.
can sing.
Hmm.
Are there songs in the Unsinkable Molly Brown? Because I can imagine that she would have sang in that. I've never
No, I
seen it,
never saw that. Yeah, but
but she's super talented and she's like stage actress and she's been in musicals.
mhm.
So I mean,
Ooh,
she sings a lot.
you know who else was in this? Who I believe was also a stage actor. Was it Stephen Ray?
Oh,
Yeah. Yep. So he was good. Geez, what was the last thing I saw him in? I feel like he had to have been in stuff besides V for Vendetta, but yeah,
yeah. Honestly, I don't know if I'd know him if I saw him, but yeah.
he was he was Kathy Bates's husband. I don't know if they showed him in the trailer.
I don't know if
Um,
they do. They showed Maggie Smith's husband a couple times, but I'm not sure if they showed. Was the guy who was shopping that like the woman made a comment about him shopping and how that was the real miracle or something? Was that Kathy Bates' husband or was that Maggie Smith's husband? I don't know. I
um,
didn't really see him. I only saw the back of him anyway.
I'd have to rewatch the trailer. There was like three husbands. In fact, so Maggie Smith's they showed. He would have been like the balding guy. There's a younger girl who goes with them, and so they would have shown like her husband was like a young guy, and Kathy Bates's husband would have had like dark like black hair, curly, but he would have looked like age appropriate for her.
Yeah, I don't know if they showed him in the trailer.
He's definitely
It's
done a
hard
lot
for
of like
me. Yeah, not knowing which characters go to who. Like it's
Mhm.
hard for me in a trailer to remember, oh, I saw a guy
This
like
is
that, you
this is
know?
fair. This is fair. Maybe
Yeah.
after you see it, I'll be like, all right, what'd you think of him?
Yeah, maybe. That's the thing. Like I'm so bad with titles and I'm bad with character names, so I always refer to them by the actor or the actress that played
I was
them.
gonna say I know the character's name. I don't know if they mentioned it in the trailer, so I don't know if it would mean anything.
Yeah, I wouldn't have I have even caught on. I have to hear it a bunch. It's kind of like a that advertising guideline where you have to like run something by somebody 13 times before they remember. I'm kind of in that like I have to hear it a lot and see it a lot and connect it. I'm not good with it off the bat. I remember the faces. I can tell you if somebody showed up at this point in the movie or at this point. But yeah, I'm kind of I don't know. I don't have a good memory for words.
Well, you've had a great memory today. You brought up so many like things, so many subtle nuances, observations. I think you were a great guest, and I
Well, thank
appreciate having
you.
you on. Yeah,
Yeah, I had a lot of
and
fun.
and if you see any of these movies and enjoy them, let me know.
I will
My
absolutely. And
my goal in this is always to either steer people towards the movies, especially the theaters, or if it's a massive dumpster fire travesty to save people.
no, sure,
So
yeah.
yeah.
So it's a double edged.
Very. And
Yeah.
all I can do is help with some info and see where you land.
Well, I probably
But,
will see at least one of them. Most likely, the horror movie would be the one that I'd like put on my list and actually say, let me seek it out. But the other ones I
sure.
probably will end up watching because I do watch a lot of movies, just not when they're new.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I mean it's the world that we're living in, and maybe we can take the last minute or two and talk about this. Do you have any thoughts on the strikes that we got them both now? So Hollywood's like
well,
90% dark.
well,
Yeah.
I'm always pro labor. So I'm
Mhm.
absolutely like in their court, especially
Of
seeing,
course.
yeah, to give my opinion, like the obscene amounts that the people who are saying they shouldn't be striking are making. It's
Mhm.
just obscene. So
Right.
it's hard for me to hear people like at the higher level saying, oh, they should come back to work. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, you make the same thing in a day that they make in a year. You make more
And
than in a day than they make in a year. So I think,
so I mean
yeah,
we're both old enough to remember the '08 one.
yeah.
think that ran. I want to say that ran a couple of months before they and I mean at the time that was just writers.
Yeah.
Um, so because I know a lot of the shows had to end early that year. You know, all their seasons were kind of
Yeah.
cut, and I think by the summer they'd figured it out because when the following year's worth of TV shows came out, they were, they kind of returned to their normal length.
Yeah.
What kind of effect do you think this one's going to have, given we've got kind of double trouble going?
Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, I
Hmm.
hope it's longer. I hope that they work
Hmm.
long enough to get what they want, because I feel like it's a particularly challenging time
Hmm.
where a lot of executives
Hmm.
don't realize the value
Hmm.
that a writer brings. And
Hmm.
a lot of them are probably thinking, oh, at some point AI will be advanced enough that we can just replace these people. When
Ugh.
I think that if you want something creative and something that I saw an interesting quote today, or I don't know if it was a quote or I read it in an article where they were talking about don't let anyone take all of your art and give it back to you in spoonfuls. And that's essentially what AI does. It collects all this stuff and then it kind of like spoons it back out again in a like substandard way. And you're not ever seeing like the entirety of someone's creativity. You're not seeing them like their human experience. And I think that that's something that really needs to be preserved. And I think the executives are being very flip about it. And I think if it were, I see the meme going around on the internet that talks about how AI is more likely to replace the tasks of an executive than a writer, because you need a certain amount of creativity, which AI doesn't have yet. It can fake creativity by ingesting creativity, but it can't be creative yet. I mean, obviously down the road, I've read a lot of science fiction, down the road that might change, but I really do
Sure.
think the timing of this and the fact that we should be having these conversations about AI and art and copyright and everything like that. I
Yeah.
think that writers are underpaid, always have been,
Yeah.
you especially considering the volume of money that the industry makes. I think it's
Mhm.
obscene what they're paying writers, especially to
Right.
live in places like LA. Super
Yeah. Oh
expensive.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really curious to see how long it takes for us to sort of see it trickle down, because right now, for your average person, it's a story on the internet. It's not something really affecting our everyday lives. I mean, like it's kind of like when you heard about the bird flu killing off all the birds, and like it didn't really matter to people until you were paying $8 for a dozen of
Right.
eggs. you
Exactly.
know
Yeah.
so I'm really curious to see at what point it becomes part of the conversation, at what point, like what kind of effect is it going to hit, like we're going to stop seeing new movies hit the theater because they're in post production, so they can't
Right.
finish the
Yeah.
actors can't promote anything. The writers obviously aren't going to promote anything.
Yeah.
um so I yeah, I'm curious to see, because you know, uh, I do this, for fun, because I want people to have an outlet to kind of look and see, what things are, worth their time to watch. So I wonder at what point we're gonna have to pause that
Yeah.
conversation. But
I think it'll probably like give it another season, because I feel like a lot of stuff is pre-made for
mhm.
you already start to see it on like the late night shows,
Oh
because
yeah,
they're like,
oh yeah, they've
you
been
can't do
dark, yeah.
anything anymore. Yeah. So I mean it's tricky because it's summer now and a lot of them kind of take time off anyway. I think once if they're still going in the fall, people will start to feel it
Yeah. And I mean, with TV shows, I can definitely see that. The movie one is the one that kind of makes me wonder, like, if it'll hit sooner or later. Because I mean, sometimes when I see these early, I get in on these like early screenings and things, they're they're sort of at a point where sometimes they don't render via VF completely, things like that. So you show a screening and then you find out, like, oh, everybody just walked off and you can't do reshoots or stuff. Well, suddenly that movie has to go on the shelf.
right.
And
Yeah.
sometimes that's just a matter of weeks. Like there was a Robert Rodriguez movie that they actually gave me um a disclaimer at the beginning, that they said that this is like a raw cut, and that based on feedback would help them determine how they were going to finished rendering the visual effects of the film, and I'm like, that's crazy. So something like that maybe was hitting the theater 3 weeks later, if it was during the strike, just wouldn't come out.
Yeah. I have a lot of friends who are either documentarians or animators. And
Yeah.
so their small projects they tend to work with in more of a collaborative way where they might be the director. But like I have one friend that's making a documentary about a rapper, and
Ooh.
it's all animated and it all uses animators of color because she's a rapper of color. And so like the way he's doing it, I have a feeling that we might see an uptick in the super independent stuff being released
I wouldn't mind.
because they don't have that like executive like tiered structure. It's kind of the director is like being scrappy and hiring the people and that
Well,
sort of
sure.
thing is coming out. So I feel like
Well,
the
and a lot of
festival
those
will start
people
grabbing
are,
more of that.
yeah, a lot of them aren't necessarily like part of the union. They're just
Yeah.
working to get their products out there.
Yeah. And I don't even think you could call people like that scabs because the projects are too
No,
small,
no.
so
Well,
they're just
they're
working,
they're,
you
they're
know.
creator owned.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they definitely wouldn't be like, a lot of them are also on strike if they have other jobs, because I mean, it's the nature of the beast. When you get paid that little, you're also like potentially doing other work on the side. So you might keep doing that for your livelihood and still be on strike. So I'll be interested to see how it goes and where
Yeah.
it goes. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate having you on,
Well, thank you for
and
having me.
of course, this has been Movies in Minutes, and I'm Nabil Khan. Catch you guys next time.
See you later.